experiences that the presenters are going to share with you in terms of major capital replacements. First, I want to tell you a little bit about the room and some of the features if you have not participated in a webinar series with us before. First of all, in the upper left-hand corner is our download pod where you can download copies of the presentation, as well as if you need help with the audio, or if you want to download a TAM Technical Assistance one-pager that talks about all of the information that we have on our web page, you can do so in the upper left-hand corner. In the chat pod, you can put questions during the presentations and information that you want to share with us and the presenters. At the bottom of your screen below the presentation is the caption pod where we, if you're having difficulty hearing, you can read along with the captioner. So I'd like to introduce our speakers, both of them, well, all three of them at one time, and we will just transfer seamlessly and then answer questions at the end if we have time available. Our first presentation comes from Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, also known as VTA. Mr. Bruce Abernathy and David Malinga will talk to us about some of their asset management TAM plan development and life cycle challenges. Then we will have Mr. Jorge Pubiones, formerly of Cobb Link, currently with SRTA, talk to us also about a major capital replacement program project that he managed while he was at Cobb Link. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Bruce and David for their presentation on VTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shadoni. This is Bruce presenting the first part, and David will present the technical portion of it. So in case people are not familiar with VTA, this slide tells you who we are. We're a Tier 1 agency providing light rail, bus, and paratransit service with more detail above. VTA will also be the owner of the VTA BART extension from Fremont to San Jose and Santa Clara, and each of these services creates its own challenges in inventory, maintenance, midlife overhaul, recording, and capital planning. Our talk has two sections, as I mentioned. I'll briefly describe kind of the TAM planning and in program implementation, and then David will discuss inventory, data, asset life cycle, and capital replacement challenges. So what we found is some of the difficulties in implementing our program, the challenges were communications and silos, which played a large role in the information breakdowns in acquiring our information. Accurate data for our asset register, changes in asset status, maintenance records, and planned asset replacements were all affected by the communications breakdowns in the silos in the agency. And then we come to the program resource limitations and dealing with culture change. These challenges are not unique to VTA, but primarily we have a staffing and funding limitation, and also not only communication silos within the divisions, but communication silos within our software. So our resource challenges give us less time to navigate the software systems in multiple divisions where existing processes and practices in inventory, categorization, and capital planning take place. These cultures are very ingrained, and this is also where asset creation, onboarding, inventory, rehab, and replacement planning take place. So our resolution to our challenges comes first in our executive leadership. As FTA guidelines point out, no TAM program will be successful without executive buy-in and support. VTA's Chief Executive Officer and our Chief Operating Officer are vocally and demonstratively supportive of our TAM program, as are many of our other VTA leadership. So we are attacking the communications and silo challenges from every front, including the CEO and the tools listed in the blue bar. Instituting change management principles to manage such a significant culture change with the TAM program, we first developed a working group that brings stakeholders from every department and division to the agency to participate in the decision-making process, which improves communication and an understanding of how the TAM program will help them in streamlining their asset management and planning for rehab and replacement. The group discusses the issues and working items currently in process, as well as procedural and policy-related items. The buy-in from this group is making the process move forward toward our goal of a state of good repair and developing an asset management culture, otherwise known as a mature asset management agency. Additionally, we have implemented a multidisciplinary TAM team structure between grants, which is David and I, the overall TAM team, operations, and construction, that assists not only in communications but also helps reduce the effect of our resource limitations by calling on resources from all three departments. Our final change management process effort is to resolve the software communication problem by reducing those 7 software that do not talk to or interface with each other to a single EAM software solution that can house all of the asset information and be accessed by staff at VTA on an as-needed basis. This goal is what our CEO calls the one-button resource. And now I will turn it over to David to give you the technical portion of our TAM program.
My primary role is data collection and analysis, and I just want to share my experience in this role and the challenges that I face daily. The challenges I face have been identified as being inventory, life cycle assessment, and cost replacement evaluation. Before we jump into these challenges, I would like to elaborate the inventory format as shown in my next slide. Let me give you a brief history about our inventory. The inventory was started in 2005 and has seen several updates since then. We did one in 2007, 2011, 2015, 2016, 17, and I'm currently working on the 2018 version. The hierarchy is a template format with 5 major categories, which are the vehicles, facilities, guideway systems, and stations. Our inventory is maintained on an Excel spreadsheet in FTA 4 categories. We convert it to a template 5 categories above, and we are able to create the following reports: the state of good repair backlog, the asset condition, investment policy scores, and cost needs. This inventory is shared with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC. And I just want to note there, you've seen the one in my note in red there is, which says, and I quote, regardless of an agency asset management maturity, the inventory process is foundational. And this is a source from the FTA guide, November 2016. So the accuracy of the inventory is key. I will now talk about the data sources in my next slide. We have 3 primary data sources, which is Physical Asset Register, which was started in 1973. So it's 45-year-old, and it's quite dynamic. The Fiscal Asset Register list, which started in 1973, is dynamic data source that contains critical information related to assets, like cost and activity dates. We also have another source which we call the cross-project log. This log indicates start and end of projects. It identifies the project managers. It also identifies the scope. We also have the CIP list, which gives us the status of the project, so I can focus on the projects that's coming to closure. Within the log, we have the SAP data, that's the breakdown data that can be used to identify the following: the contract documents related to a project, the hard and soft costs in it. We also have a third source, which is an engineering project library, where I can get the data from the as-built and the design drawings. I just want to share with you an example that I have for the data mining process in the following slide. If you look at these two tables, the top one is the data that resides in the register. And then that is converted to the table below, which is the template format table. Take note, if you see there are 3 asset records of buses in a register, which is transformed to one data record in the template version in our inventory. So if you look at these sources, it requires a lot of a bit of research in it, and to be able to get the data into the register. I can give you the second scenario where we are looking at the structured data in the register, which are the 2 record items. But then when you dig further into the design drawing and then trying to interpret this data, you can see that we are talking about 3 types of assets. They're all fencing, but they are with a different attributes. So with this type of data, of course, you need to go to the other source, like the library I talked about, the engineering drawings library, and then be able to take the data from there and reconcile the 3 and do it. So it's quite intensive because this is a manual process currently. I just want to clarify further and show you what I also facing in the existing data. If you notice the highlight records, the data seems to be very odd. And then if you just accept this data without visiting it, you end up screwing your analysis output, like the state of good repair and the condition rating. So I'm manually have to go into this data set that I've inherited and be able to try to contact the various project managers, which are several in this case. And then there are questions asked about this data when I first looked at it. I look at how many years it's been over past the useful life. And my question is, haven't we replaced this with one of the projects? So it would mean I have to go back in a project list and then go as far back and find out whether there's a new project that did the replacement. Or the other question I might ask myself, has this been rehabbed maybe? Or the question I'm asking from here, have we determined the useful life? Is this a correct useful life really? So those are the challenges I want to share with you. And I just want to conclude my presentation with the next slide, talking about some of the challenges and lessons learned. So the challenges is the data mining I mentioned, because you notice we don't have a direct link to various data sources. The resources, it's just one FTE, which is me, and then I'm assisted by supervisor here, Bruce, who puts in 20%, maybe sometimes 50% of the time. And the third challenge is the communications. We have problems identifying the retired and decommissioned assets, which are not readily reported. So Bruce will elaborate on the second challenge, which is the BART asset onboarding.
We mentioned earlier, VTA and BART have a partnership in creating the extension from Alameda County into Santa Clara County. And this presents some unique challenges working with two agencies that have such significant responsibilities with the assets involved. Some of the challenges and lessons learned is the challenge of working with two providers with significant differences in how the agencies operate. This is an experience in trying to blend two distinct cultures that share asset responsibility with different structures, reporting, procedures, practices, et cetera. And you also run into, again, the communications gap, and it shows up in those different methodologies of onboarding and the software. BART uses Maximo, which is a very intense software, and as David mentioned, we're currently still on Excel until we get our EAM software on board. The task of onboarding is understanding and completing an extensive inventory at a much more granular level than VTA is used to, and using templates from an unfamiliar software. And like I said, Maximo is quite intense in its depth, so this is new. And in one way, it's a good thing because you have all that granularity that you created for them, but when we roll it up, we still have some background to look at when we onboard these assets. And speaking of onboarding these assets, we are literally onboarding more than a quarter of our current value of assets just in this one project. And again, the good part of that is there isn't months and years of data mining that David talked about, because we have all the data right here, right now. We can keep this up to date as of the day we put it into practice. So some good and some difficult. Our lessons learned is we need to meet each challenge starting with what we know and the data we have, use a work plan for the larger challenges, the resolution tools at our disposal, and the abilities of our available resources to resolve the challenges in managing the capital planning of our physical assets. And David and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Bruce and David. We're going to hold questions till the end of both presentations.
Okay, so we're going to mute until they're done then.
Awesome. So the next presenter I introduced in the beginning is Jorge Pubiones, and he's going to talk about a situation with Cobb Link. Go ahead, Jorge.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jorge Pubiones, as Mr. said, and I will be sharing with you my experience as the project manager for the bus replacement plan and developing the TAM plan at Cobb Link. The bus you see on my first slide here is actually the pilot bus from the very first order of buses, and this is the first Cobb bus to have the brand new branding for Cobb Link. As we move to this next slide, this just gives you some quick facts about Cobb Link, formerly known by CCT. Some of you may be wondering about Cobb Link. We used to be known as CCT, it's now Cobb Link. Some additional information about Cobb Link, if you're not familiar with it, it began in 1987. It is a Tier 2 agency. It provides service to 2 transfer centers, 7 park and ride lots, and 6 MARTA train stations. It uses the same smart card fare system as MARTA called Breeze, and this facilitates the easy transfer from one system to the other for those customers that need to go from Cobb into Atlanta for work, shopping, entertainment, or whatever other reason. In this slide here, I'm showing a picture of what the fleet was like in 2012 and some projections that we made as far as replacing the fleet. As you can see, we had 2 critical situations in this picture. One was the aging fleet, and as you can see, a rising service failure number, which was getting quite high. As a result of this, I was given the task of replacing all 44 of this, all of these buses in a 3-year span between 2013 and 2015, which I found to be a tall order. What was the goal of this plan? Improve reliability and thereby improve customer experience. On this slide, as I mentioned, I was managing the 2 projects, and they're both very related and very interdependent on each other. So the fact that I was managing both, although it caused me to spend a lot of time on them, it was not that bad as far as developing and working 2 of them to completion and being successful at it. On the bus side, as you can clearly see from this slide, that aggressive proposed timeline of replacing all those buses between 2013 and 2015 did not happen. Also, on the TAM side, we ended up with some budgetary issues that caused us to split the project into 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. On the phase 1 of TAM, we decided to attack the asset inventory, the asset condition, and the decision support tools. And we also developed the first TAM plan document based on what we and the consultant felt the final rules would require of us as a tier 2 whenever they were issued. Then in phase 2, we went into developing targets and goals and made sure we had all of the data ready for any changes in NTD reporting requirements. Due to the budgetary issue that made us split the plan into phase 1 and phase 2, we pushed out investment prioritization tool into 2018 alongside the revision of the 2015 TAM plan. So now that plan will be compliant once the final rules were issued in 2016. We were still very aggressive in our bus buying, as you can see from this table, and I go into more a little detail here later. One of the things where the 2 plans fed into each other, when we did the condition assessment for the TAM plan, it confirmed that the 2004 and 2005 fleets needed to be replaced as soon as possible. Both fleets came up with low SGR ratings of 1.8. So as we moved into the next slide here, I want to talk to you about some challenges of the bus replacement and the new TAM plan. Procurement, disposal, and asset inventory. Well, as I said, we didn't meet that 2013-2015 replacement plan. And one of the main reasons was because when I started to work on it, we did not have an active bus procurement contract in place. So we had to issue a new RFP. Luckily, Athens-Clarke County, another transit agency here in Georgia, was initiating work on an RFP of their own, and we created a consortium joining them and several other agencies here in Georgia to procure buses on the one RFP. Now, this was a project that took time. We started working on the RFP in 2013. We didn't order the first bus till 2015, and the pilot bus from that first order was not ready till 2016. So not having that RFP ready was truly a challenge. Another challenge that I ran into once I started receiving buses was that I had a lot of buses on my property, and I actually had to coordinate with Cobb Airport to park some of the retired buses at a lot they had to clear space on our lot for the new buses. This was a little bit of a challenge because now not only am I ordering and receiving new buses, but now I have to start working on disposing of 44 buses and, like I said, finding that parking space for them. The biggest challenge I had with the TAM was limited resources. I was staff of 1, and I really had to manage my time well to keep these 2 projects going and on a timely basis. So shifting myself around and making sure that I prioritize the right activity at the time became very critical. The financial planning also became critical in handling both projects, especially in the bus procurement, because I had to make sure I was working in close touch with the funding source, with the grant person, finance, to make sure that not only did we have the funding source, but making sure that they were programmed and ready so that when the buses came in and I accepted it, we could actually pay the manufacturer. So this became really critical, this making sure that we were communicating with each other, talking to each other, and not getting ahead of each other, especially I couldn't get ahead of them in ordering buses. The TAM plan content was also a challenge because we did not know what we were going to be required to do. So we went on a lot of assumptions based on the questions and answers that had been provided up to that date, and between ourselves and our consultant, we went ahead and developed a TAM plan based on what we were hoping would be the requirements of the final rules, and we would not have to do really massive revisions to it. Now, how did all this effort help us? Well, as you can see on this slide, 2016, we have barely started deploying the new buses. 2017, all of our new buses have been deployed, and you can see a dramatic drop in service failures and more than a 30,000 increase in vehicle revenue miles between failures with the introduction of this new bus fleet. Our fleet age also dropped by almost 9 years. So this aggressive bus procurement, very challenging, but very rewarding as far as the reliability and providing the customer a better experience. So the key question now in this slide is, how do we go through this aggressive bus replacement plan and get it accomplished? Well, as you can see from this table, between fiscal year 16 and fiscal year 18, we will have deployed 61 buses in Cobb Link into service. We've already received 47 of them. There's another 14 that are going into production in July. So like I said, although we didn't meet the 2013 to 2015 original plan, we still did it in a three-year period, and we actually bought even more buses than we had anticipated because of some new service that was put in. There's also an additional future order that you see on the fiscal year 18 for $3.4 million, and that is to replace the 2008 New Flyer fleet. So by the time the fiscal year 18, fiscal year 19 period ends, our local fleet at Cobb Link will only have 6 old buses in the entire fleet. Everything else will be relatively new equipment. And the big question that comes in, and I get asked is, well, how were we able to put together this much funding? Cobb Link is not a big agency. Well, the story is that we had some great people in our grant and finance department that didn't stop applying for grants, didn't stop accumulating and saving the money. So by the time we needed to get the money and buy these buses, the money was there. Now, granted, if the buses would have been bought back in 2011, 2012, 2013, we wouldn't have had this scenario. We wouldn't have had that much money stored. But it was great as far as for myself as the project manager to know that the other staff on the Cobb Link had done a great job of providing the funding for us to do such an aggressive plan. Where did the money come from? We had different sources. We had some money from the state, actually from CERTA, the agency for which I'm currently working. We had FDA money. We had local money. And we even had some money that came through MARTA to assist in buying several of the buses. So a lot of planning on the budget side of the equation to make sure that funding was there and ready when we pulled the trigger. And I really thank the grant people and the finance people for that. Oh, one note before I go into this next slide, just so you know, at the time of replacement, the 2000 New Flyer fleet, the average revenue miles life to date was 625,977. And for the 2005 fleet, it was 554,241. So these were buses that had been used in heavy local service pretty extensively. And one final note is that the contract that we made to buy buses was a 5-year contract. And at the end of the 5-year contract, which will be next year, we will have purchased, Cobb would have purchased 67 new buses under that contract under its option of 74 buses. And now I'll move into, got a little bit ahead of myself here. Okay, lessons learned, asset inventory. Boy, if I had one word regarding everything I'm going to go through on lessons learned is planning. My advice to anybody is please do your planning. Develop a replacement plan. Look at your grants. Look at your, apply for the money. Have the money ready. Look at scheduling regular updates of your TAM plan. Make sure you plan. Planning will make your life a lot easier, especially if you're the project manager on any of this type of projects. As far as the asset inventory, similar situations as I run into when I've talked to other agencies. It's got to be an accurate database, and it should be one that can be easily updated. If it's not accurate, everything else falls apart. One of the challenges we had was consolidating all the data sources. Finance had a source. I had a source. Somebody else had a source. So I had to take all of those spreadsheets and put it all into one center location where I told everybody, if you want to know what we own, this is where it's at. And this will make life a lot easier for you if you are the asset management administrator or doing anything with asset management. Prior prioritization, I had to learn to be very flexible because I had to shift and go with what was hot at the moment and keep these two projects going, and there was no way that I was going to let either one of these projects slow down because we really needed to make them happen. We need to identifying tools that will make prioritization easier, can be explained and defended if somebody challenges, and provide a level of detail that's expected. Are some key things on prior prioritization. Financial planning, I can't say enough about this. Make sure that you maintain a good working relationship with the person that's doing the grants and providing the funds. Again, it gets all back to planning and being ready so that when you got to pull the trigger on the order, you're ready to go and you have nothing to worry about. On the agency resources, get back to being flexible. I had to handle multiple projects. I just had to be able to balance my time and make sure I had everything moving along the way it needed to be moved. I had to become familiar with the disposal process. I had to figure out how I was going to get rid of all of these buses that I was taking out of service. And that was something I had not done at this particular agency, so it was a learning experience for me, but everybody was very supportive. Now, this next slide, I'm looking at, okay, what is the future at Cobb Link? Well, 2018 is a pretty busy year at Cobb Link because we have to update the TAM plan. Cobb Link signed a contract to update the TAM plan that was originally developed in 2015, and that TAM plan will be ready, and when I left, we were targeting July 18 as having it completed and ready to submit to FDA. We're also contracted with a consultant to help us in developing an RFP to procure EAM software. And why EAM software? Because as a team of one, I felt I needed every tool I could have at my disposal to make better use of my time. So we contracted the consultant to also assist us in developing the RFP that we could put on the street. And again, the target was to have that out on the street by July 2018. And and hopefully have it implemented in 2019. Fleet replacement plan. We have the order of 14 buses that I mentioned earlier. It's going into production in July of this year. And we have another request to order 6 more buses replacing the 2008 New Flyer fleet. Now we get to a very key component of future plans, and that is having the tool to order buses. When I left, I had started working with Athens, Clark County to go ahead and do a new consortium RFP, just like the one that we have both used over the last 4 or 5 years, and have that out on the street and award it in time so that when it came time to order the 2010 New Flyer, replace the 2010 New Flyer fleet, we could go ahead and order buses. Fortunately, I left Cobb Link. I'm now with CERTA, so I can't see that project to completion, but I'm sure that Cobb Link has staff that will definitely follow through on this and get that new contract awarded. One of the interesting things is that as I'm here now at CERTA, and I'm actually procuring and doing an RFP for EAM software is one of my projects currently that I'm working on. I thank you for participating in this webinar and for your attention. And on this page, you have my contact information. As I mentioned, I am currently working at the State Road and Tollway Authority of Georgia. If you have any questions regarding the presentation I've shared with you today, or anything regarding the 2 projects that I manage while at Cobb Link, feel free to contact me by phone or email. On the right-hand side is Ms. Andrea Ford's information. She is the current division manager at Cobb DOT Transit Division, which is Cobb Link. And I am sure that she would be glad to provide any information that you may have regarding Cobb Link, and especially the future plans and what's going on in 2018. And again, thank you so much for your time and participation in this webinar.
Thank you, Jorge. At this time, I'd like to invite both agencies to unmute their phones in case they want to comment on questions that have come up for either of you guys. I have pulled the Q&A to a more central location here, and we'll go through as long as we have time. And please feel free to continue typing in your questions, and we will get to them. It looks like some of them have been answered, but I'm going to go through them anyway for those that haven't had a chance to peruse the chat pod. So the first question that comes out, there is some confusion about what EAM and SAP means, and there is a definition provided there: enterprise asset management and a work management system. There is another question that asks what the EAM software VTA has selected, and I see that Bruce and Dave, I'm going to let you expand on this, but you say you haven't selected a software yet. Do you want to expand on that?
Well, I think I mentioned in there, we created a 2-phase process in consultation with other agencies. And the first phase is establishing what our actual needs are. And once those needs and business processes are established, then the consultant will put together kind of a cafeteria plan with recommendations and risk assessments of the different levels of specifications and capabilities of the different softwares that are either available or can be merged. Well, yeah, the selection process, we've narrowed our proposals down to 3. We'll interview those next month, and then they'll work on the process until next August, and then we'll do another RFP when budget provides for the actual purchase of the software.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, something's happening over here. Rachel, did you intend to do that? I made a mistake with the visual. Okay, let's get to the next question. I think this was for Jorge. He was asking, Dave was asking, do you own your storage facility, or is the entire operation set up via RFP? If that's incorrect, you can follow up, type in your clarification.
By storage facility, if you mean where we store the assets, that's a Cobb Link that was owned by Cobb Link. Cobb Link owned all the facilities. We contracted out the actual service. If you're referring to the software, we were in process of getting ready to do the software at Cobb Link when I left, and here at CERTA, where I'm at now, we are developing an RFP for software and hoping to have it out on the street by this summer. And we're reaching out to consultants to give us some assistance in reviewing our RFP to make sure that it is best that it can be to meet the needs of us here at CERTA as a SRTA.
Okay. Folks, I just want to bring your attention to the fact you could still type in the chat pod. Just because it's enlarged on the screen, you can still type your questions in there. You don't necessarily have to use the QA pod, but feel free to if you feel more comfortable doing that. The next question was for VTA, I believe. What kind of consultant was used? How was this need identified? How did the hiring process go? RFP. Oh, no, that's actually probably for Jorge.
At Cobb County, what we did is we worked with WSP, was our consultant on developing the TAM plan back in 2015, and also helping us to get ready for the RFP. Before I left, we did a market survey where we went out and brought some companies that WSP has selected, and we had them demo following a specific script that we had done to show us that they could do the functionalities that we needed done. Right now at SRTA, where I'm at now, we are in the process, like I mentioned earlier, of getting assistance from a consultant to help us finalize the RFP for software, to make sure that once we put it on the street, it will definitely give us the product that we need to meet all of our needs here at this agency. And we haven't decided yet on that consultant. We're still interviewing consultants, and we haven't decided who will help us.
Okay. Here is, oh, that's for Dave, and Bruce responded. A question that came in from the chat pod. What vendor did VTA work with to evaluate software? You just mentioned that.
No, I said we're still in the process of selecting that vendor. We've narrowed it to 3 proposals, and we'll interview them in April.
Okay. Another question from the chat pod. Oh, just a clarification on Dave's question about the storage facility. He is referencing the County of Rockland contracts the bus service to an outside agency. Jorge, I'm not sure if that clarifies for you his question about who owns the storage facility, or if the operation is set up for RFP, if you wanted to add any response to that or not.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Cobb Link, Cobb owns all of the facility, all the transportation facilities are owned by Cobb, and then Cobb contracts out the actual operation, the service. So the drivers, the maintenance staff, all of those are contracted out. Currently is First Transit is the company doing it for Cobb Link. But Cobb does own everything. It owns the assets, it owns the facilities, it owns the transfer centers, most of the park and ride lots. Some of the park and ride lots are owned by SRTA, but we both CobbLink and SRTA both service that particular parking lot. But for the most part, yeah, Cobb does not lease or rent any facilities or assets.
Okay, great. Next, you see there some accidental paste from me, but the next question is the CobbLink presentation available? I just downloaded the file download pod, so you can get the presentations and download right now. And then Michael asks, if at the time of your SGR and TAM plans, at the time of initiation of your SGR and TAM plans, did you determine the life cost of your rolling assets, or did you base the prioritization solely on asset age? I'm assuming this is for Jorge.
Our determination to replace went both on asset age and asset condition. We looked at the condition and what it would take to get them back into satisfactory status, and the decision pretty much was that it was better to go ahead and replace those fleets and dedicate that maintenance money to getting the 2008 and the 2010 fleets into good condition.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mr. Doney, can we go back to Jordan's question regarding
Oh, yeah, sure. Your
change
philosophy for
management
change
process.
management?
Yeah, the change management process I use is a bit of a hybrid, and it's kind of change management process based on situation and resources and so forth. So I wouldn't say it's purely one philosophy or another, but basically change management is, if you want a successful change in your organization, you need to get the people who the change will affect to be part of the change. So that's where we started with, and actually we haven't progressed too far beyond that because we're still young in our asset management program. We're only 3 years. And when you're changing a 2,300 employee organization, it takes a little more time. The other one I'd like to go back to is, I can't see it up there, but the question on what made FTA select the asset management program. And I actually answered that one to Jordan, so it was the wrong answer. That's why I wanted to come back to this. But one of the questions was, why did VTA select the asset management program? Well, it would be easy to say because FTA requires it and they're the ones that provide the money. But actually, when the program was introduced to the agency, our general manager and CEO is also very progressively minded. The other thing that she saw was two things. One, transparency and information to both our electeds and to the public, and that's the one-button push dashboard that she is hoping for in this EAM software program. And the other thing is, you know, it was obvious that this organized program that not only involved the people who own the assets and the people who create the assets, but it involved the people who work on the budget. So there was a direct link to our capital replacement and our budgeting process. And that, you know, was a better way of doing things and a more effective way of managing our assets. So that's where we started. So
there's another question for you, Bruce, if you want to take a look at it, the one from Nicole, how you work through the silo and ingrained process challenges.
I would say that's an ongoing process as well. Like I said, we've only gotten to a certain degree in this change management process, but one of the things we've been able to do is we become the conduit for communication between the divisions, and we have a single source of asset inventory, which is David, so that when there are questions among the asset owners, they have a single source they can go to, and that starts breaking down those silos and those communication gaps because everybody goes to the same place. When they want to know about, what they can expect to meet the things that they've set up, we have a couple of plans. We have the bus replacement plan, the facilities improvement plan that are used to set up projects for our budget. And so what we do is we take the inventory, we put it into Termlight, we run the Termlight analysis, we get the categorical expenditures recommended by Termlight, and then we take those to the asset owners and asset creators and then vet the dollar amount and work out the projects, and then those projects are recommended to the budget. Now, we're not quite there yet. We've done a test run on that, and it was okay, but we're trying to refine it a little bit before we actually make it part of the official budget process.
Okay, thank you for that, Bruce. It looks like we might actually finish all the questions this time. Karen or Kathleen, I'm sorry I keep getting your names mixed up here. Kathleen asked, is a written narrative available for today's presentation? I'm assuming she's referring to a transcript, meaning the things that we said during the presentation. And Kathleen, there will be a transcript, a raw transcript, which is what's at the bottom of the screen in your caption pod. There will also be a recording of the webinar on our TAM webpage. If you are referring to something other than those items, for instance, a document that these providers have that support this information, I am not aware of that, and that will not necessarily be made available, but those other tools will.
If you'd like to show the last page of our presentation, our contact information is on there in case anybody wants to send us questions or whatever.
Okay, sure. I'll go back there. The TAM webpage is www.transit.dot.gov/TAM. Thank you, Rachel.
And anybody that has any, like I mentioned earlier, anybody that has any questions about my presentation, feel free to contact me, and I'll be glad to share with you. I do have the TAM plan that we developed in 2015, if anybody wants to look at that, and some other spreadsheets and documents that I developed as I was doing the TAM work at Cobb. And I can share that with anybody that might be interested. Just email me and I'll get it to you.
Okay, thank you guys so much. And it looks like there's no more questions coming in from the chat pod. So I will extend my heartfelt gratitude for both of you taking your time out today and sharing with us your experiences. Again, this webinar will be recorded and posted on our TAM webpage, and you can take a look at it or share it with friends. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time today. I'm going to close out the webinar now.
Thank you.
Thank you.